I'm realizing there are going to be some AI note takers that might take the spot, so just be aware.
We'll have to just check and remove the AI note takers.
Sure. I can see two at the moment.
Done. I've removed them.
I hope everyone can see my screen. Sorry. Hi, everybody. We'll start in about a minute or two. We'll just have some more people come in.
Can you see me? Are you able to see and hear me?
Yes,
Yes,
Poonam ma'am, we
I
can.
can.
Thank
Okay,
you.
great.
Uh, we'll just start in about a minute. All right, we have about 27 of us. Mr. Should we begin? You want to wait a minute more? I think we can.
We can start, Yasha.
All right. Hello everybody. A big, warm good evening to each one of you present here today. Today we're all here as part of the Learning Planet Festival for 2025 that's happening in the celebration of the International Day of Education. I am your moderator for today. My name is Tiyasha, and I lead Adhyan Foundation's work with my team towards the vision of a good school for every child. I welcome you all also to be a part of this panel that we're doing. For the theme that we're talking about today is transforming education for sustainable tomorrow. And really trying to spend some time to unpack what sustainability really means and what meaning it holds in the space of education. But just as we dive into what the theme is and talk to all of our panelists who are here as well, just some housekeeping rules for everybody. Uh, Humble request to keep your mics off throughout the process. And if you can, please do switch on your videos. It's really nice to see some of your faces. If it's possible and your bandwidth takes it. Also requesting everybody to rename your tag. You will see that beside your name there are dots that allows you to click on a button called rename. You can put your name and your organization's name so that we know where you're from and the space that you represent. In addition, this is not a one-way conversation alone. We would love for all of you to share your questions, your comments, thoughts as we go forward into the whole conversation today. So please use the chat box to the utmost possible way. We will have a designated 20-25 minute slot for all of us to take questions in the end after the speakers have spoken. So we will take questions and comments at that point as well. And just one request also is that as we share questions, requesting you to please keep it short and to the point so that we are able to take in as many questions and thoughts as possible throughout today evening. So as we said that today we're talking about this topic, transforming education for a sustainable tomorrow. As we were going through the topic and really understanding how do we want to present this, there came a realization that the term sustainable one is defined differently for different people. And it is also used in so many different ways as we see today when it comes to the ecological space or even within education itself. There are so many different meanings that all of us hold. And we felt that it was important to really understand what the origins of the term in itself is. And in that uh, journey, I went into a rabbit hole, I think, in the past few days, trying to understand what this term is, where does it come from. And in that, I think this is what my understanding has been. Um, as I began to look how this word even came to be, the first thing that I found out that in the 1700s in Germany, there was silver mine administrator who first coined the term sustainable in the lieu of saying that, hey, I want to keep mining, I need timber to do that. But how do I ensure that there is a permanent, steady flow of timber coming in for the silver mining that I do without leaving space to say that, okay, there's no place or time to regenerate these resources back. And that's how the term for him came in as sustainable. Cut to many, many years down the line, the term sustainable development came in through the UN Brundtland report in the 1980s, as when we started talking about what really is happening in terms of the environmental pressures in the whole world, and how poverty was a big aspect of it, because it was said that the global poor or the global south, in the quest of trying to grow and develop further and try to meet where the global rich was, had to do a lot, and that compromised what environment or social progress meant at that time. And with the Brundtland report, they said that sustainable development has to be something that meets the present, sorry, meets the present needs without compromising the needs of the future, right? And then there were very like crucial three parameters of environment, economic growth, social progress that had to serve a balance. And there are also many different ways in which one could define the diagram itself. But that's where the idea of sustainable development grew. And as we looked at that, a very important part of that social progress or towards meeting this journey of sustainable development, education became very central to that entire idea. And in 2002, when it was declared the UN Decade of Education, the term education for sustainable development came up, and it was said that at that point, it was essential that any kind of education that is delivered to children and students of our world would should be able to work towards the goals of sustainable development, and in a way that children learn to be people who are able to make informed decisions, who understand the societal, the environmental, the economic pressures that are there, while also working towards having a good quality life. And through that, and I think there is nobody who doesn't know about this, about our sustainable development goals. which were released in 2015, where the fourth goal is quality education. And if you all actually even go and look up what the sub goals under this are, it talks about things right from, accessible education, something that's available for everybody equally, beyond gender, beyond caste, beyond class, and all other different social avenues that we look at. Um, Something where there is good quality teaching, a place where there is um, upgradation and new building of different facilities available to people. And all of this together is supposed to reach the goal of quality education by 2030 as defined by the UN, right? So as we see this journey and as I was studying all of this, I think what comes to my mind was, how do all of us here define sustainable? Is it exactly as it's present here? Because I know my thinking changed quite a bit from all of this. I had no idea that there was something in relation to mining, even when it comes to sustainable, and it's something not often thought when I think of sustainability in terms of environment, right? And what we're going to do today is I'm going to request all of you actually to put on the chat, what do you feel the definition of sustainable as a word, or sustainability or sustainable development means. It'll be really nice to see some of your responses on the chat. And as we see the responses, I'm going to quickly introduce all of our panelists. We have a great panel here with four lovely people that I've had the opportunity to hear, to speak with, to understand their perspectives as well through many different channels. We have Professor Poonam Batra here. Anything championing with regards to teacher training and capacity building, Poonam ma'am is the go-to person. I'm not going into details of each of the panelists' backgrounds. It's available on the chat so that we save time. We then have Ankit, who leads Sanji Sikhya, an organization that's based out of Punjab and really works on how community can come together to work towards quality education and what that movement really looks like. We have Vijay Bhartiya, he leads We the Yuva. Again, with the idea of how does student leadership and student voice really come into the picture and can propel this idea of sustainability in education through them, as well as a key stakeholder, of course, in the process. And last but not the least, we have Akshay. He's the founder of Edzola. And today, I don't think we can have any conversation without talking about technology. So I think keeping that in mind, and when we talk about sustainable interventions, tech today plays a very crucial role. And Akshay will be sharing his um, experiences and the work that he's been doing around that towards education and sustainability within that space as well. I'm going to quickly look at the chat. Do we have some comments? Or if not so far, if some of you want to unmute and share, what do you feel? Well, how do you define sustainability in education? That'll be good too. We can take two people's responses. If anybody is raising hands, then let me know. I can't see that. Is there anyone? Nishtha, I'm unable to see. If not, we can just start with our speakers. Yeah, all right, okay. I then invite Poonam ma'am, handing it over to you to begin with just how do you define sustainability, and what do you think sustainability in education is?
Right. Thanks, Teyasha. I would thank the Adyan Foundation for giving me this opportunity. A quick sort of understanding of what I have been able to gather thoughts on sustainability and sustainable development. I have recently been involved in a GCRF funded Southern led research network project where we have looked at this question and also questions of transforming education for sustainable futures. So, what I find is that when people talk of sustainability, they largely look at issues of the environment and the climate crisis, the ecological biodiversity crisis, and so on. But I think it's important to understand that sustainability is also about the social. How do our societies sustain themselves? Because specifically in today's context, I think it's the global context, not only in India, that we are facing huge challenges in terms of identity politics and so on. So, if there are deep inequalities in a society and society remains disharmonious, then sustainability gets an important issue for us to examine. So, by sustainable development, then I would mean both social and environmentally just societies. Societies that are able to then also look at issues of how the climate crisis or other environmental issues are impacting society, specifically the most marginalized, the most vulnerable. And these are really, really intimately related, the social and the environmental aspect, because it's about people and how they get impacted by these issues.
That's lovely. Thank you. And I think when we were looking at the triangle, the Venn diagram itself, I think social is that very important aspect, even described in the Brundtland reports. That's lovely. Ankit, how about you? How would you describe?
Am I audible, Tyasha? Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, Poonam ma'am. Building on what Poonam ma'am just said, it's not just environmental but also social justice that leads to sustainability. My work links a lot with the inner aspects of being human, starting with emotions, going as deep as identity and beyond. And I base my work on Indian wisdom traditions. A lot of it is based on uh, our fundamental texts like Yoga Sutras and Abhidharma from the Buddhist psychology. And sustainability in education specifically to me means that there's a fundamental regenerative quality to whatever we are doing, be it the parents who are demanding quality education. Before that, they even have an understanding of what learning really means, and the teachers who are uh, enabling children or enabling students, they have their own vision for their classrooms, for their students, and students themselves feel a sense of agency, feel a sense of leadership, a responsibility for their own learning. And I feel when all these, and of course the administrators, administrators don't see themselves as trying to control some outcomes, right, or deliver some learning outcomes, but instead creating, I would say, learning environments, creating enabling environments, the causes and conditions that can lead to uh,
Uh, Ankit, yeah.
yeah.
All right.
Was I audible?
Thank you. Yes,
Yeah.
yes. The last part, were you saying something or were you concluding?
No, I was just saying these four factors when they come together, and each of them have a regenerative quality themselves, which see the interlinkages. That's for how I feel sustainability will come. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, and Ankit. And I think that's also the beauty of the panel today, right? That we have representatives coming from these most of these spaces, if not all. We don't have somebody coming from the system or the government itself, uh, in that manner. But I think that's what's interesting for us to gather today in our conversation. That how are these represented, and how do they look at sustainability itself within the space of education is quite exciting. Thank you, Ankit. We'll move to Vijay Bhai.
Yeah, thank you, Tasha. I think it's a wonderful opportunity to hear both of them, Poonamji and Ankit. Both of them, I think, it's this called sustainability as a very comprehensive approach. It's not a limit thing; it's a very inclusive one. And when I look at sustainability in education, I feel that the education which nourishes life. I think that's very important for the person when I see the sustainability in education and the education which can build the character or the student or the youth that we call. And the ultimate purpose is education for living life. If that is there, I think the sustainability all this could be incorporated with Ankit and the Poonamji, I think also mentioned that. So this is what I feel is a holistic and inclusive approach of sustainability in education. This is my approach. Thank you.
Thanks, Vijay. And I'm sure we'll hear more given the work that you do when it comes to student leadership and the voice of students themselves. And how does education really shape their thinking, their understanding, and where can they take that opportunity to set that example for themselves and decide how they would want to see the world, a sustainable, a holistic world
Yes.
towards a protected environment, towards economic growth as well. I think that's quite exciting there as well. And thank you so much, Vijay Bhai. And lastly, Akshay. Um, Tech is often thought of as that go-to for sustainability, right? And I maybe there are two different sides to it as well, and we would like to discuss that as well. But yeah, what are your thoughts?
Thank you, Tyasha and Adyan Foundation, and completely agree with what Ankit, Poonam, and Vijay have said, right? And to me, I think representing technology is often a very tricky game because the world in the last 5 years, like have seen tremendous increase in technology, be it COVID, which kind of, like COVID, what it did was, increasing the divide between the haves and the have-nots, right? Those who had smartphones accelerated, and those who did not had, it widened the learning gaps. And similarly with now, right, in the last 1 year or so with AI, again we are seeing another rise in technology where even Google search might be redundant in a few days, right? People might just use ChatGPT or something like that. And to me, when I think of all this, right, and when I think of technology in the role of sustainable education, I think there are two or three pillars which comes, right, and two or three pillars which comes to my mind, which is one is accessibility. Accessibility is how do we make technology accessible for for the people who have and have not, right? So I think how do we make it accessible for communities, or be it schools or children? Second is, how do we make it relevant? Most of the time technology is there, but how do you make it relevant to the stakeholder or the community we serve? Um, so that is the second thing. And the third is, how do we make it then self-reliant, right? So how do we empower stakeholders to kind of, use that technology to, make sure that they're not dependent on external stakeholders. And fourth is how do we keep innovating, right? So innovation is something, we live in a time where innovation is unfortunately not a option, but it's mandatory for everyone, right? So I think when I think of sustainability education, I think these are four things that come to my mind. Yeah.
That's lovely. Thank you, Akshay. And I think even, today as Adyan Foundation, we work in three of the northeastern states, and there too, I think I don't think there's anybody I've met who doesn't have a phone, who doesn't have access to some kind of tech to be able to gather knowledge, to learn with each other. And I think that's what I find very fascinating to say. What does that community then look like through these four pillars that you said, right? Like accessibility, relevant information, becoming self-reliant, and how what kind of innovations are possible in these different setups within the communities that we work with. Great. Thank you so much, Akshay. I can see one response on the chat from Rodur. He says that what he understands by sustainable is something that is progressing without compromising the ability of the future generations, right? And I think that's how also we saw some of the definitions come in. So thanks, Rodul, for sharing your thoughts. I would again request for everybody on the chat, if whatever thoughts, questions that you have, please feel free to share it on the chat as well. And just as we're doing that, I would now like to get in a little bit of a deeper view from each of our speakers, given the experience and the background that all of you come with. I'm going to start with Poonam ma'am, and then we're going to move to Ankit, Vijay Bhai, and Akshay. Uh, just give me 1 second. Sorry. Right. So I think, Poonam ma'am, as you've worked a lot in the space of teacher capacity, right? And it's even in the sustainable development goals, one of the areas that talks about in to be able to reach the goal for quality education by 2030. Um, the quality of teachers and how they are able to deliver the definition of good quality education to the children of our country, that it almost that entire responsibility lies on their shoulders, right? And I know you've spent so many years working with them, talking to leaders, even in the government and administrators. Um, what is it that you hear from the teachers themselves when they how do they think of sustainable in their profession, and in the spaces that they all work in?
Yeah, so, well, I think one aspect is to look at what teachers' understanding of sustainability is. The other is to look at it from the SDG viewpoint, since they have specified SDG 4 specifically to enable quality education. What I would like to present here for people to think about is the fact that when we examine the current educational structure and its arrangements, including the preparation of teachers, education is structured in such a manner that it actually, in a way, contributes to unsustainable ways of living. And I'd like to just take a couple of examples. And this is something that the teachers also would probably hold a belief or a view about, which is, first of all, that if we want to make our society sustainable by way of, let's say, social justice, then we have to understand what these injustices are and how they play out in classroom situations, how they play out in school and university settings. So there may be many different ways. For example, discrimination against the Dalit children, discrimination against, let's say, Muslim community, which is so much happening in our society right now. But there could also be injustices, which I would call epistemic injustices, which means that the kind of conceptual theoretical knowledges that we give to us young students or even in higher education, those become exclusionary. In the sense, one way would be, let's say, it's decontextualized knowledge, very abstract, universalized, which doesn't speak to the reality of our students or their surroundings. And I think this kind of an epistemic exclusion also means that the knowledge that we give to our students, whether at the school or higher education level, we are not enabling them to use that knowledge to examine their own ground social realities. And therefore, it becomes important that we include the lived experiences of our students and our teachers. So, right now, the teachers are probably not even equipped to engage with this question whether their own lived experiences can be considered curricula, because curriculum is defined in very set universalistic ways based on certain principles that we haven't even formulated in our own country, that come from somewhere outside. And I think that is very important to understand. Our teachers probably don't even understand. I remember when we started the 2-year B.Ed program, we introduced the course on gender, which we had been doing in the BLED since 1994. But since the Supreme Court judgment that came and then the Justice Verma Commission report that came, then nationwide we had to include gender as a credit-based course in all teacher education programs. So when I taught this 2-year batch for the first time in 2015, many of the boys in my class, they were men, of course, they asked me, why gender in teacher education? Why should we be even looking at gender? We have to teach chemistry or history or geography or the mathematics. So we spent 3 months engaging with that question. And I think they understood at the end of it, they said, ma'am, it should have been a 100 marks course rather than a 50 marks. So it's a question of understanding how gender discrimination or caste-based or region-based discrimination can actually be very debilitating for our students. And if we do not address that within our own educational settings, then they'll never get the opportunity to break those shackles. One, of course, is to hold the state accountable, but the other is to also enable young people to think in broad horizons so that they can look at their own realities, examine them, and assert their fundamental rights and the rights of other citizens. I mean, there's a lot to talk about, but I think I should give everybody else the floor. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Poonam ma'am. I think we were discussing this in our check-in earlier as well, right? Like I think as simple as the word may sound, sustainable, and it may sound very direct, it's not that. It's very complex. It is, like you were saying at that time, a wicked problem, right? There are so many aspects that sort of influence this in itself, and it's not one without the other. We cannot keep looking at it in isolated piecemeal manners, and we have to start looking at it as a whole. And I think the examples that you gave, it really shows, and I think till today, even in our policy that says that, we have to be able to make learning contextual, we have to be able to learn in our mother tongues, we have to be able to practice things that are there from around us and not the idea of somebody else of what's right or what's wrong. And I think that space for engagement and dialogue within your reality itself is not very easily seen in schools today. And I think the more we're able to do that, that definitely leads towards that understanding of what sustainability in education would look like. So thank you, ma'am, for your opening thoughts. I would now move to Ankit. Ankit, like we were saying earlier, that you do work in the space of getting the community really engaged, getting the students really engaged in this process. What I would also like to know from you, and of course, you please share some thoughts on what Poonam ma'am said as well, but also some more on how does the community at large even view their role in this ecosystem, right? Do they even see it as an important part? Or, and if yes, then what, if you can share some examples where we see them really taking part and engaging with this idea of moving towards sustainability in education?
Yeah. My context is the work I do in Punjab. We work with in 4 districts and primarily in rural areas. And I'm speaking from that experience that I have from the last 6, 7 years. I think we are really far off from maybe the conversation we are trying to have here when it comes to the understanding of the parents and the panchayats uh, towards towards their responsibility towards their own students, the children. And I will add to what Poonam ma'am is saying. Before they can start taking some actions, are they even aware of what their actions are leading to? Are they even aware of so many ways they continue to, carry forward the same old things? For example, even if teachers want to implement some progressive things in the classroom, parents would come and say, no, in Punjabi, they would say, "Sade bachchiyan nu kuttaya karo," like, why don't you hit our children? Because they're getting spoiled. So this really shows how far we are from understanding compassion or understanding safety in the classroom for ourselves. That's just one anecdote I'm sharing. When it comes to community, I understand that in 2 ways. First is the community of parents whose children are going to that school. One. And second, in case of villages, it's the panchayat or SMC as an institution which are responsible, which have some responsibility towards school as an institution in the village. I think at both levels there's a huge gap. First is I think this talking about social injustice. Uh, I think we're all colonized people, and we still not even aware, and we continue to perpetuate it through as education structures do still perpetuate, but in informal ways also, by saying, our students should learn English. Our children are still not fluent in English. and that's why let's go to private school. So we're not asking any deep questions, or maybe I would say our parents are not aware. Parents in at least the some 100,000 families that we are aware of. I've seen very rare instances where they say, I want to understand what my son or daughter is learning and not worry about whether it's English or not. It's very rare. Coming to Panchayat, I feel there also the major mindset is that is it school is a philanthropic activity, right? Let's do it. It's for our common good. So at least that much understanding is there. But what is happening inside the school? What can also happen inside the school? These questions are definitely missing. Given that I think there are only two institutions in Punjab which are common to all villages. One is Gurudwaras, second is schools, and both of them I think are kind of have formed their own silos in their own ways. I also do have some examples which give us hope to continue the work we are doing. Mhm. These days, lots of young people are coming in the position of sarpanches and panchayat members, and these are like all young people. They're driven, they're passionate. Now they have access to power and formal power and resources. So when we reach out to them saying, and they're almost our age or younger, so we reach out to them and saying, these are the some possibilities we can do in school, and with such open and warm heart, they receive us, and they're genuinely open to learning, saying we don't know what to do. We know that we are here because on the promise that what happened in the last 10 years, we don't want to repeat that. So that's our recent memory that hasn't worked. What can we do different? And I think there we see lots of young people who are either from the NRI community in Punjab or from the local ones who gotten some formal responsibility in the system. Them coming forward and bringing in these kind of ideas that we are discussing in, and of course dabbling with the world of adults who are saying, things have we have to maintain the status quo. So yes, it's a constant dialogue, as you were saying, Tyasha. Change doesn't happen overnight, and we have yes, we can say we have been independent for 75 years. We can also say we've been independent for just 75 years. So I think we must persist and we must hold on to hope, and we see enough examples for us to keep going.
Yes, thank you. And thank you for like I think elaborating on the like who is the community, right? Who all are who make that community and uh what questions they ask or don't ask, which define the way one functions. And I think like you correctly said, I think I have heard so many times where parents have said, हम तो ऐसे ही पढ़े हैं, तो हमारे बच्चे भी ऐसे ही पढ़ रहे हैं. And there's sometimes not that question is never asked, or I think at times there is that feeling of saying no, that can't be it. We cannot keep doing it in the same way, and we need to see some change. And you tell us how do we come together, or this is what we think we should do. How do we do it? And I think that drive is what I'm seeing more of, at least in the spaces that we have also been working in. And I'm sure, Vijay bhai, in your context, there are lots of these examples, right? Like, given that you get to work so much with young people and students themselves, what will be interesting to hear from you is, again, what is the demand or what are students wanting, right? Today, in the context that we're in, where things are changing so rapidly, what is it that they want to see happening in your experience?
Yeah, thank you. I think it's very interesting because student or youth or children's, one thing that is common is they're very curious. They always want to ask questions. They're very reflective. So the younger generation is wants to have spaces. They want the power. They might not understand what is power, but they want the power to decide. And the spaces that we have around them don't want to give that power to them. So there's a constant struggle among the younger generation, and I think in some way wherever there are spaces, you can find those children's coming up with new innovative ideas and doing so many things. You can find that because I feel that they're able to. One thing what I said is curious. Other than they understand things and they want to perform. They have an inbuilt capacity to learn, unlearn also, and relearn also at the same time. These three processes are so constant in them, where as they go adult, things might change, but those who remain young, even they'll shine out very easily in the later part of life. So the adaptation to change is very high among the younger generation, and I think that is the hope, and that is what I think the statement which last time when we discussed, this is non-negotiable. Giving education to younger generation is non-negotiable. We have to give them because the change is possible only through them. Sustainable education is only possible when we give proper education to younger generation. Then the change will come. Other change would not happen. Even if you see in the Punjab cases, when people went abroad and studied, they understood the importance of education. So changes are coming. So that awareness needs to build up, and all the even in the marginalized communities, that awareness is coming. So how do you create that ecosystem which can help younger generation to come out? If we can build up that system, I'm sure within 10 years, if we have passionate teachers with us, we can bring change. Yeah.
Great, thank you. And I think I can see one comment by Abhijit here that, when he's asking what really is the purpose of education, then, right? Like, as we are discussing all of this, what is education towards? What is supposed to be the end goal of all of this? And while the SDGs and many definitions are present towards saying that there should be 21st century skills, children should be critical thinkers, they have to be creative, they have to be able to have the agency to make decisions, they have to understand what informed decision making looks like. And I think today in this space of tech, and also looking at all kinds of information that's readily available, as much as there is access available also to people, I think that's also something to look at, and that's where Akshay, I'm going to pull you in. um, in your view, I know you did mention the four aspects, right, that are important as pillars, but like ma'am was also saying, there is that other side. Are things even moving? Are things leading to sustainability or the other way around? And I think what I would like to understand is that, there's often a blind spot that we may have when we're going into interventions, designs, and as thoughtful as it may be, there's always things that are unexpected that can happen. And in that space, how does technology come to be? What is your view of uh, technology for sustainability in that way?
Um, Thanks, Tiasha, and thanks to other speakers as well. And I was just reflecting, right? I mean, we spoke about three important stakeholders, right? One is community, other is school and students, and others teachers. And we've kind of been privileged enough to, work with all of these stakeholders through our work. And, I'll try to, try to summarize and give some points, right? And I think, Tiasha, to address your last point, right? Even when I think when we are very close to the problem, right? I think we sometimes don't see the problem itself. And I think that is often a blind spot we have when we are very close to the ground. And I think through our work, when we partner with organizations, I think that is a lens that we carry to see, hey, what can be done differently, right? And I think a few, like a few misconceptions that I want to break, right, is, technology inherently, like does not create any impact or, does not solve any problem. What technology does or do is it's just a catalyst, and it is a catalyst to, like amplify human potential, right? So how you use technology highly depends on, how you empower the user who's to using that technology for. And I think technology fundamentally exists to amplify human potential, right? And on that note, I think I will, maybe share a few examples from our work, right, on how technology can actually help in, either, scaling or, like amplifying the reach or being a catalyst, right? Is, like think of students, for example, right? Students in a classroom, and one of the, I mean, I have a lot of such problem statements, but one of the problem statements, like generally I think of is, ACER report says that, a grade 6 kid, like is not able to read, like do a grade 2 text, or, or there is a gap in, additional, differences in their arithmetic understanding, right? Few can do division and few cannot, right? And we all know that, right? But why does the teacher, or where we kind of, use the same lessons for all the children, right? And I think that is a conventional notion. And, and this is where I think, and I'm still waiting for a time where India can go there, but China really leverages artificial intelligence in classrooms to understand every student's individual learning levels and kind of, fine tune how each student can learn, right? And learning levels is one of those areas where, students, like how do we empower that student, right? Because objective is not to get everyone, to a certain level, but, wherever the student is currently, we need to get them one step or two steps ahead, right? um, and I think a lot of, like research currently is doing on assessment techniques, or, or artificial intelligence there, right? So that is one where place where technology, right? And of course, right, in pedagogy differentiation, so like how do you use technology for the same, right? Other is, like when it comes to, teachers, right? Or when it comes to teachers, I think we've had the opportunity to work with certain state governments on, like how teacher trainings are conducted, right? And here, I think the problem statement that, like one of the problem statement that we helped solve was, how like there are layers of teaching in government, right? Like there is a set of master trainers or who train a set of stakeholders, and then they will go into their respective districts and then train, right? And then it eventually the teacher is trained and it goes to the class, right? Now, when the teacher actually goes to the class, what is the cascading loss which occurs because of this, right? Because is the training effectiveness same from the level? Because every time there is a loss because of osmosis, right? I learn, I distill probably 80%, and then there is this, right? But how do you effectively capture, right? And this is where I think a strong database systems can help, right? And the need for data is very critical. I mean, need to data is very critical, but I think this is the place where a data can like really play a role, right? And the last example that I could give is, community, right? Outreach, right? So I think one of the beautiful ways, or even how this call is happening, right, is, like in Zoom, we are all, different parts of the world. And, like how, it brings together a community, right? And tech really is that, is that tool or the infrastructure that comes together. Now, how do we use that through outreach, right? And we are seeing a lot of, rise in, like WhatsApp chatbots, for example, or, or SMS reminders, or, like how do you create outreach, or, how do you bring communities? And even a simple WhatsApp group, for that example, right, is actually bringing communities together, right? And I think these are some of the ways that I've seen, how technology is really, plays a role. And yeah, I think I will just thought of, giving these examples. Uh, yeah, and that's about it.
Yeah, thanks, Akshay. And I think even in our work, one of the we're trying to build a learning management system, right? And it in called Abhyas. And I think the primary focus of that is to say there is a teacher or a leader in one part of the country who's trying to solve, say, the problem of student attendance, and on the other part of the country, there's somebody who's also had been facing similar issues and they've been able to figure it out. How can these two people come together and exchange notes and learn from each other, right? And I thought, I mean, that's definitely something I wouldn't think that we'll be able to do without technology, right? And just simply that we've heard so many people say that I know there are people around who have done this. It cannot be that they've not solved for things like this. So, but I don't have access. I don't know how to reach out to them. I don't know who to speak with. And I think the tech really, I think what you said is bringing the community together through such platforms is something that we can do through tech. And I think Akshay, some of the points that you were mentioning, right, in terms of what kind of pedagogical interventions need to take place? How do we look at cadence class? And I think I'm going to go back to Poonam ma'am herself. And I mean, I'm sure these are not new questions. You've also dealt with it in so many different ways. What is your thinking around it? And I can also see a comment from Pramila Kudwa saying that how do we implement something like differentiation? And what role would something like that play even in sustainability?
So you're talking of implementation of differentiation or something that Akshay said, is it? I haven't understood the question very well.
So I
What
think
is this
Akshay will, but you
differentiation
can
about?
answer that. We can come back to this later.
Sorry?
No, I was saying that what you could answer is towards what Akshay was talking about, the different pedagogical practices that we need to deploy, and what does cadence loss look like when it comes to teacher training, teacher education at this stage?
Yes,
Your
yes.
thoughts on that?
Yes, I think, there is a lot of talk about how new pedagogies have to be brought in and how technology needs to be leveraged to bring in this new pedagogy and so on. I personally think that, this may not be the best question to ask. I think the question that we need to ask is, how much of control of the teaching and learning process are we giving to teachers and children and students? With technology, I seem to find, and I hope that this will not upset people who think technology is probably the best way forward, is that technology is tending to take the controls out of the main actors in the education process. Who is the main actor? The main actor is the teacher and the student, and yes, to some extent, the parent community, right? Now, at the moment, the way our education system runs, and I think I'm speaking to the question that even Abhijit had raised about the purpose of education. Now, if we want to transform our education system, with what purpose are we wanting to transform? One is to make a more sustainable future, more sustainable societies. That is a larger goal. But what does that mean? It means many, many, many things. For example, one of the SDGs is also to reduce inequality. Another SDG is to actually look at livelihoods, right? And there is another one that talks of epistemic justice. So there are so many different aspects which actually are cross-cutting themes that SDG 4 will have to address in terms of quality education. But the main point here is, A, to bring curriculum to bear with the realities of the students and the teachers, which means to decentralize the process of curriculum formation. But NEP 2020 is only centralizing more and more. So it's saying that we will give a national framework for curriculum and a national curriculum and also a national pedagogy and a national language and a national assessment process. I think we are going very far away from being sustainable if we give way to that kind of centralization, because then we are homogenizing it. With the AI can be very, very interesting. It can be a very good supplement. Technology is, I'm not decrying it. I think it can be very powerful. But let it go in the hands of the teachers who are being empowered, rather than some third person sitting there doing all the assessments of children and then saying, telling the teacher, this is the assessment of your children, now do something about it. I think assessment also belongs to the realm of teacher. The teacher should do the assessment in order to get feedback on the curriculum, to get feedback on her pedagogic practice. And I completely agree with Akshay when he says that there are so many layers through which teachers are trained. It's a cascade model since DPP started in 1993. And that cascade model has told us that it doesn't work. Because by the time it goes down to the teacher, it's like a Chinese whisper. I'm not sure even she understands what's being talked about. I think processes of teacher empowerment and teachers empowering students can only happen through decentralized measures where technology can play a very, very critical role. But not when technology takes away the power from the teacher and the student and hands it over to a third party. It could be a corporate organization, it could be a national testing service, but it's gone away from the main actors who are supposed to take control of teaching and learning. So I think that's very important. Sustainability is also about enabling individuals and groups to empower themselves. And you will have to use technology to do that empowerment rather than to take the intellectual agency away from teachers also, which is what tends to happen with more and more centralized systems.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much. I think that also shares, I mean, again, this adds to that complexity that we were talking about, right? Who holds the power? Who has control over things? Who decides what should children learn, right? And I think if like you said, the intellectual ability that control that power is taken away from the people who are main actors, then we're just moving towards this one direction that's not going to very soon make sense in the and set in the realities that are present. And I think, Ankit, I know you have to drop off sooner than the others, so I just want to hear closing thoughts from you actually, just based on what Poonam ma'am was also sharing. And I think one more piece that I want to add is that we often hear a lot of tussle between what teachers think of parents and their role, and what the role of the parents and teachers and the community is in the mind of for teachers themselves. And there is that blame game that happens, कि homework नहीं देखते हैं parents, but the parents will be like, teachers कुछ करते ही नहीं, आते ही नहीं है. So how does one deal with a situation like that? What's your thinking around it as well?
Yeah. Thanks, Sasha. Actually, I think it's one of the most important questions. I forgot to talk about the school management committee before, and I think a lot went in from the civil society, not just in India, across the world, to make school management committee an integral part of the governance of a school. And thankfully, we do have a body of parents coming in and so-called supporting the teacher. But like every other bureaucratic process, it happens very well on paper. But when it comes to the real action, we see all kinds of differences, as you are mentioning, saying parents don't have time to come to school, or teachers don't want them to come to school. If they're coming, no real conversations are happening. Lots of things are just being passed on the paper, etc. And I think again the divide is, I can say, primarily because uh, it is imposed from the top, as Poonam ma'am was saying. School management committee is now put into the Right to Education Act, so they have to have it. Some governments have made it like mandatory for SMC to be formed, so now teachers feel the pressure. And while if we reverse it, the same way teachers need support to be able to uh, uh, give the best in the classrooms, the same way you can say parents also need support to provide handholding to the children outside the classroom. Hmm? We've completely missed that aspect, right? And there's a completely different paradigm that work operates in the school, and homes, we have different cultures that work. So the student who's coming in is already in two different worlds. And same for the parents. Actually, when they are coming into the schools, they are projecting their own responsibilities on the teacher, saying the teacher will take care of the student, my children, for a while, and in return she will uh, enable the child in these so many ways. So there's no real conversation happening saying what is the role of a teacher in the life of a child, what is the role of a parent, how can they collaborate, and SMC, what role SMC can play to enable the better governance of the school. How can teachers, especially in rural areas when we have such shortage of teachers, how can teachers feel supported in terms of running the day-to-day affairs of the school? I think missing is the dialogue actually. Because we say it very, very loudly at Sanji Sikya. You bring a 5-year-old child at the center, which is maybe class one, right? You bring a 5, 6-year-old child at the center. Every human being will forget their politics, whether they're right, left, this party or that party. They will not say, I want this child to not have a good life. Nobody will say. It's just human for us to give our best to our children, whether it is my own or somebody's. But somehow we've really missed this thing. That what's the main thing? The main thing is that our children should be able to achieve their full potential. For that, are we providing them an enabling environment both inside the classroom and inside the homes? And that requires a conversation, that requires the world of adults to come together and create these kind of conditions everywhere. And those dialogues are missing, I feel. That's why the divides.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Ankit. I know you're great, exactly on time for your parting. But thank you so much, Ankit. While we'll continue with the other speakers, thanks so much for your time and coming in. I know some of your team members are here. So for
Please,
the audience, if you have specific thoughts, questions for Ankit and the work that they do, please feel free to put it on the chat and we'll connect you with their team
and I'm
members.
really
Thank you
sorry
so
to
much.
leave on my pardon to my co-panelists as well. I have this family thing going on. So thank you so much for your time and space today. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you, Ankit. See you.
Yes, and
I
I
think
must say that
carrying
I'm
forward
feeling
from,
inspired. Yeah, thank you.
yes, thank you. I think carrying forward with what Ankit was saying, right? Like, how do we ensure that the child remains to be at the center? What does it really take to do that? Because, like Poonam ma'am was also saying, there's so many things happening. There's so many expectations that are there of the system to ensure that the child becomes this person who is able to have a critical mind and all of that. But what really takes somebody to put in that time and effort to ensure that there is enough resources, space available for them to be able to do that, right? And Vijay, I would like to hear a little bit from you in terms of if you have any examples where you've seen people come together to do that, or students themselves are coming in and saying that, hey, these are the kind of resources and spaces that we want to be in, want to cultivate further. And how can the ecosystem really support them in doing that?
Yeah, thank you. I think it's taking forward what Ankit was saying, the dialogue and engagement. I think that is missing element in all the processes that is happening. We have been talking about it, about having a dialogue with the what you call with the stakeholders, different stakeholders, and coming with the solutions and interaction. I think that's very important. And what I recollect is for the last few years, I've been following one what you call person, Vinod Bodhankar from Maharashtra, and he has been doing wonderful work. What are the things we've been talking about of engaging with the students? He has been doing it very passionately about it, and it's something like something change transformations taking place in that Maharashtra villages. So he used to tell a story that he used to go to the class with a fish ball. He used to go to the class and distribute chocolates to the students and asking students to eat chocolates. So after eating the chocolates, he would say, okay, now put the wrappers in the fish ball. Once it is said you put the wrappers in the fish ball, there's a hesitation. It's a living fish. How can put plastic into it? So that consciousness starts developing. So Vinod Bodhankar has been going to schools, many schools now, and starting synthesizing the children. And the unique way is he doesn't do it one time. Once the children understand this process, he asks them to bring plastic every day from the home. Children bring plastic to the school every day, and every single student have to do it. If a one student is absent, mean that class will not get full marks. So everybody is encouraged to bring plastic every day. So imagine bringing plastic to the school for last 6 years, 7 years continuously during the period from 4th standard to 12th standard. That creates the ecological consciousness. So he was able to do that in the process. And not only that, after the plastic comes up, they do recycling. There's an agency which collects the plastics, and all children get special marks for that. So they get credit. And They also earn money through the plastic that they recycle. And what he does is, and he is he recently there was a Sangli is one district in Maharashtra, and they had a meeting with educational officials there, and they said we want to do something for the plastic in their what you call district. So there he made a presentation, and then very nicely he was able to link all the SDGs in 45 minutes. All the SDGs in 45 minutes. And he challenged, if you run this program for 1 year in your school, you don't need to do anything single individually. All SDG goals are incorporated in your curriculum automatically. And he did this. Now this project is going for last, I think, 10 years now. And they're able to reach out to 750 villages in Maharashtra, reaching out to about 2 lakh children. They've been practicing this. So I think the student-led movement by Sagar Mitra Abhiyan, I think it's a unique example whereby he's creating that consciousness among the children. At the same time, educating teachers, community members also. That's a community. I think community involvement is also very important in this education process. So he's been able to do that. So they say, why plastic? Because plastic goes to ocean. And we have two nations. One is land, other is ocean. The land boundaries that we have created, it's our imaginary one. There's only two nations. One is ocean, and this is land. And he feels that unless we expand our geographical, imagination, not into boundaries of countries, but if we expand geographical thing, then you can bring ecological consciousness in what you're doing. It's not about me or you. Other element is, you see, he considers pollution as the biggest problem. If you look at all the 5 elements of earth, we have been polluting it. Everything is polluting. So how do we move towards cleanliness? If the waste is there in your home, don't put it in the garbage street. It has to be recycled. So that's the lesson that children carry home. So this is, I think, wonderful experiment which Sagar Mitra is doing. I think more links can be also shared with them. And it's now a global movement now. It's a global movement where children from the world are participating in these processes. And this Vinod Bodankar has been passionately doing this for a long time now. So this is one presentation I had. I can share the link if somebody wants.
Sure, thank you, and we'll make that available to everybody. And I think, there are so many such examples in ways that we can bring different ideas and get children to take, center stage and lead those processes and really share how they view things, how they would like to do it. And I think there are like the examples that you've mentioned, and there through education you have to facilitate those spaces to make these things come alive, right? And that learning becomes not unidirectional but also as a collaborative collective way for all children, all people to come together and do this towards that common goal. Thank you, Vijay Bhai. And I think I know we're about 20 minutes left for today's conversation. I want to actually open up for questions just as we speak right now, and can see there's a lot of buzz on the chat already, which is great. And we can take some questions from the chat, or if some of you would like to unmute and ask any of the people who are present here. It could be a question or a thought as well, but we'll try to keep it short and simple.
Someone called Rashmi Prakash, who's in the audience, had her hand up for a very long time.
Yes. Yeah. Rashmi, is she here? Yes, she's here. Rashmi, you had a question. You had raised your hand earlier. If you can hear us.
Yeah, I've been hearing about the SDGs and the essence of sustainability. Mr. Chaparia, the one who left, had quietly weaved some sense into it. Think about it. I mean, are we really working into education? Are we really educators, or we are just gloating to be educators? We don't even have the basic sense of letting the little kids know that, you have to be sincere, first and foremost, in whatever you do. Why do I say that? The future, the falling bridges, 15 bridges which have fallen in the state of Bihar. We have broken potholes, nasty drainages. Mumbai, the biggest Bollywood blah blah. Every year it has water clogging. Where is the sincerity? Are we teaching that basic civic sense? Follow the traffic rules. Are we teaching that? No, we are not. We're worried about the climate. We're worried about something else which is simply there in print, and it comes on into new print with new versions. Are we looking at the IAS officers who've actually taken up those roles, and we just got this single puja single got reinstated after so much of bribery? Where are we as a community, as one whole India? We are not even close to where education actually stands. We failed in education. We just gloat about IGSE, CBSE, Cambridge, blah, blah, blah. I mean, just follow a simple rule. Even as educators, can we learn? Can we change our own self? We find people spitting on the roads. We still find people, going about their sanitation. I mean, it's there. We have, the Prime Minister has tried to construct all these restrooms, but it's not happening. The basic civic sense lacks. We end up, actually shaming ourselves and embarrassment. And we are not even sustained. I mean, think about AI. If you talk about AI will just hijack our children's mind, it already has. But are we teaching them simple, basic stuff? We are not. The first step is about understanding what education is. We as educators, can we change ourselves? Like one of you said, the top management is not going to, work with you if you have a bright new idea, because they're not going to bend. They're not going to change. If they're not going to change, then why the heck are we having those NEPs and new policies into place? Because we like to gloat. The top management is there with that, collar up there. People who publish papers, people who end up with PhDs, publish papers, throw money, you get it. And then they gloat. The basic fundamental, the fragment of education, the structure of education has gone. And we still are in that, I would say, blindsided by nothing. We are worrying about something which is totally irrelevant.
Yeah.
Sustain. Can we sustain in our own lives in future? And AI is at our doorstep. That's all I had to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing
Can
that.
I
I know,
just say something
yeah.
here?
Yes.
I also need to go, but I can actually completely understand the anguish with which the speaker has spoken, and I have complete empathy with these thoughts. I think we are at a stage in our society today where we have become morally corrupt. We were financially corrupt in any case, but we are morally corrupt. And I wouldn't hesitate saying that education has failed, but I will definitely like to say that education is a space today that has gone out of real educators. It's been taken away, it's been snatched away by people who have money, by politicians, by bureaucrats who want to show rankings, and politicians who want to show that they have done better than the previous. So I'm sorry, I would like to mention here that education alone cannot change society. Education can play a very minimal role, but I'm completely with you when you say that education has not performed. Well, education has not performed. Our public universities today have become degraded. The best public universities, whether it's JNU or Delhi University or Jamia, they've been raided. Students have been beaten up. They've been infested with ideologues of a certain kind, and we all know what that means. Yes, of course, Macaulay, yes. Well, Macaulay died long ago, you know. We had 75 years after independence, and we did create excellent public universities. We created excellent public universities. BHU, Aligarh Muslim University, these were created during colonial India by nationalist leaders to enable our young people to imagine a free India. And I think we did well for some time. It's not that we failed everywhere. But what has happened in the last decade is a complete downgrading of excellent universities and coming up of what is known as the WhatsApp university. And nationalism, oh my God, nationalism is something else today. Nationalism is not patriotism with which our young people grew up in a free India. Even my generation, I'm 10 years after independence, born. Okay? We grew up with a very different idea. Today, nationalism has to be put on your sleeve to show that you stand up during national anthem. How ridiculous. We did it without showing that we did it. But today it's a completely different story. So while I understand your anguish, let's not forget the fact that actually the political climate today is such where our head of the state can speak lies from the ramparts of Red Fort, then why doesn't the common man think that he has the right to speak lies? So who cares about, bridges that are being broken or that fall down? Mumbai, look at Mumbai. It's in a degraded state today. But who's caring? The municipal corporation of Mumbai is supposed to be the richest. Where are the funds going? So, yes, education can't handle that. But education can definitely empower people to question the state. But today, questioning the government means questioning the country, which is rubbish. The state is not equal to the nation. I'm sorry, I'm also outpouring, like Rashmi did. But it's important for us to understand that we as educators at least have the role to play where we speak up where there is injustice. But I'm not sure whether we are doing that because we are scared. There's an atmosphere of fear in the country everywhere. And that is what is very sad. Can education try and address that? Is what we need to ask ourselves. And maybe we can try and do that. Because I have retired, but I don't stop speaking. That's why I join your discussions. But anyway, this is a long drawn chat and a long drawn discussion. But I think if we are anguished, it means we want to change. It means we want to create a difference. And I think that human spirit matters. So I will say let's be inclusive and take everyone along to be able to take many of these issues forward where they should be, like speaking truth to power, which we don't do because we only speak that to power which the powers want to understand and want to hear. But if we speak truth to power, then we are going to be behind jail for 7 years. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Poonam ma'am. And I would love to hear thoughts from Vijay bhai and Akshay too. Yeah,
Uh, Maybe my couple of cents, right? I think it was a great to hear from Poonam and Rashmi, right? And I think I'm a eternal optimist, right? And I like to, like see the positive side, right? I think we are a time in history where, like even if you take a lot of indicators, right? India has one of the highest enrollment to schools right now. India has, the one of the lowest crime rates, right? Compared to history. So we were far worse 20 years, 30 years back. But we are, like far better in a lot of, like we have lot of lesser cases of health or children dying of malnutrition, etc., right? So I think we are at a point in history where we've progressed a lot. We have come a long way, but I think there is always like there is always much better to, right? And I think and it is in the right spirit, right? And even in this call I see a lot of young people who are like with that passion and are trying to make things better. So like of course we have come a long way and there are a lot of problems, but I think with the right intention, right, I think we can solve any problem. So I think that is something that I wanted to just, say. Yeah.
Thanks, Akshay. Vijay bhai.
Yes, yeah, thank you. And I too feel that in this today, if you see as a citizen, what is our role in this education process that we are talking about? Each person has a role to play. And the thing is, the critical reflections are important, but what after that? So what I feel is, I like the word, the adhyan. The adhyan word has a very deep significance to education processes, which we have still not discovered that. We're linking adhyan to only study, and that is not the case. Adhyan is a very deep thing. It's a reflective dialogue process where you try to reach consciousness to develop a proposal for consideration. When this dialogue starts and you start dialogue to have a proposal for consideration, not for action. See, proposal has to come to, everybody has to agree to that point of view. In the education process, if you have to transform that education process, dialogue had to start at the grassroots. Localization is very important. How do you create that localization? Where teachers are there, community leaders coming together, having a dialogue. And I'm very fortunate that few days back, you might be hearing that our Mohan Bhai Hirabai Hiralal just passed away on the 23rd January. He was a pioneer in Adhyan Mandal. We started Adhyan Mandal online along with him 5 years back. And we could see that the perspective, we don't understand the importance of Adhyan. Adhyan is not the study. How deep we go in understanding each other, coming to a consciousness. Okay, let there be a common understanding. And we keep on meeting till we get understanding and then start the learning process. So if we can do that, and a very other important insight that we have gone is how we can ground imaginaries. Grounded imaginary is very important. With all passiveness that we have, how we ground ourselves in good images of possibilities, what is possible here and now, and start working on that. I think that can make difference, I feel. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Vijay bhai. I think that sense of possibility, that sense of saying, hey, we can come together and work towards this. I think that does come from dialogue, right? That does come with the community, bringing all these stakeholders together. It's not that one has a say over the other, but it has to be a collaborative experience for all of us to work towards. So thanks everybody for sharing your thoughts. I can see we have about 8 minutes. I can see a question by Asmita that was actually for Ankit. I would invite Ambili, if I'm pronouncing your name correct. If you would like to respond to that either on the chat or you can unmute as well. There was also one person who had raised his hand. We can take your question afterwards. Ambili, go ahead.
Yes. Hi, everybody. So I'm also working in Sanji Sikya. And yes, and to answer the question, I think the solution, more or less, be it urban or rural, lies in dialogue itself. And that is one thing which might be more difficult to bring into a urban setup, because everybody then feels like we have more clarity and we have more idea on what we are doing and we know what is best for our children. Uh, so that might be the more complex part, because the idea of education in a rural setup is still based in a rural setup, and some parents understand that we want to make the near to far connection and how we want to connect with कि खेत में क्या चल रहा है, कि बच्चे को पता हो कि we start from there and then move on to what is happening in Meghalaya in the textbook given. But in an urban setup, where parents themselves are educated in a CBSE format or a state format, the question becomes, what do you mean by education? Why do you want your child to get educated? And what values or what kind of a life do you want your child to have? So that is the dialogue change in questions and prompts and dialogue that comes in. And I would also say that this is a very difficult thing to do, because even in a rural setup, when we do this, uh, for ourselves to ask such questions to parents or teachers or even officials is a difficult task because, as many people in the panel shared, we also are too embedded in a loop of fear. कि हम कैसे question कर सकते हैं? How can we, if we question this, we get behind jails or we don't get employment or this, that. So if these barriers, we can just, so this is one thing Ankit holds on very tight to, is that just ask, what can they do? Just ask. Whatever the response is, we get to know where they're coming from, and then we figure out where to move forward. So yeah, so I think my answer would be the dialogue part and the change of conversation that it has to lead to bring in quality of education or the thought of an alternative education, or to explore those aspects per se into reality and not just get uh, too consumed in a corporate setup कि अभी job करनी है, फिर उसके बाद engineer, doctor बनना है, all of those conversation, to why do you want your child to be educated? Thank you.
Thanks, Amrali. I think in line with that also, and since we've been talking about dialogue so much, I think one of the points that came up was how do we equip this dialogue to happen in the first place, right? Like, yes, dialogue is important, but how do we do it in a way that brings everybody together? Akshay, Vijay, any thoughts on your end, Amrali? That could be our closing question. I don't see any hands raised, so I hope that's okay.
Yeah. So more than dialogue, I think, Tyasha, I think I'd like to talk about a couple of things, right? One is logic of empowerment versus the logic of control, right? And if you see, we live in a society where I think a lot of things are enforced as control, like as a means of enforcing control versus empowering them. I think I saw something on the chat also, like a teacher, being asked for, like being graded on assessments or, like, or exams, etc. Everything is, like based on, like, hey, how much marks did your student score? Or, like, or even for student, right? Like if they are getting a mark, etc. It is, like a way of judging them or, a way of controlling them. But what is the way of empowering students through assessment, right? Like a simple feedback mechanism, right? Similarly, if you see the life of teacher, right? The government puts so much pressure on the teachers that you have to submit some, attendance form, assessment forms, this and that, right? And no data is relayed back to them. And what it inherently tells us is that, we live in a very low trust society or low trust systems, right? Where everything is being monitored, everything is being controlled, right? Now, if you have to shift the narrative a little bit, how do you empower that? How do you use each of these touch points to, like kind of empower? For example, instead of, like asking the teacher, like, what is the lessons that you took today, or, what is the learning levels you took today? Like maybe the question could be, like, hey, what were top 2 challenges that you faced today? How do you think we can help you, right? Or just, like just a perspective difference, right? Because, like, I think I came here to speak about technology, but I think a lot of technology is what about what humans reflect, right? And, humans, like human values plays, a fundamental need for technology. And when technology is built by humans who want to enforce control, that inherently, creates technology systems that, enforces control, right? Like, I know if anyone is working in schools, government schools, right? I know how much they hate filling these data systems or forms that is, taking the life out of them, right? Like where so much monitoring, so much control, all of it, like rooted in, like monitoring and control, but not rooted in empowerment. So that is one, right? And then how do you increase the trust, right? Like, one of the other things that ma'am spoke about was, like decentralization of education, right? And today it doesn't happen because there is a very low trust society. So how do you increase the trust in teachers or increase the students, right? Like increase the trust in students, and thereby we develop, and then, like your trust in government officials, and thereby the trust in education system. And that is something that I'm leaving away, right? Like how do you build trust? Because currently we live in a very low trust system, but how do you build trust? That is a question that I'm taking myself with, something for me to ponder with. Yeah, that's my couple of points.
Yeah, that's interesting. Thank you, Vijay. I saw a lot of nodding, so please share.
Yes, yes. I'll begin with what Akshay said, the trust building. See, trust begins where we are. Okay, wherever we are, if you can find 5, 10 people with the same concern coming together, just studying, observing the things, what's happening, the dialogue processes begins with asking right questions. So if the what you call If people come together to have a dialogue on whatever issues they want, if it is education or sustainable development goals or whatever it is, the common understanding has to come to processes. And then, see, if you make a hurry of decision making, you can't think about it. Normally, we think to act. We don't think to get a clarity of the purposes that we're doing, the purpose of education, what we're doing it. So once you get the clarity of the purpose, and then you form a, what you call a opinion of something which all is agreeable, then the things move faster. See, imposing from top doesn't help. The bottom-up approach is that even in education, whatever process you do, the dialogue has to start in family, among your friends, wherever you are, start questioning it and try to see how we can work together collaboratively for the single purpose. The dialogue is missing. The collaborative processes are missing. Yeah.
Thank you. Ambali, any closing thoughts?
Yeah, I think Akshay and Vijay also added in on how to make that happen. And with working in Patiala and Punjab and Sanji Sikya, I have seen some evidences of how the trust can be built. Because we have a single teacher school in Patiala with like 40 to 50 students in it. And this is one teacher who had like very less students, and parents did not want to enroll their children there because she was only one teacher. And how can one teacher teach grade pre-primary to fifth class? And she started by doing all the progressive 21st century skills and making videos of them. She has an Instagram account. And through that, she brought in a campaign of enrolling children in. And now the parents can see how attached and how lovingly the whole process of teaching learning is going on, and how there is quality in how the teacher and the student bond has developed with time, and that in itself has built on evidence and trust in the community that further adds on towards the officials, towards whosoever is the next person responsible, and that creates the trust there. So I think I would like to end my thoughts on that hope, and that is one evidence that keeps me going as well.
Yeah, that's a lovely example, and I think it beautifully ties in all these stakeholders, right? Like, um, for a movement to build towards that sustainable development that we want to reach as a goal, how that trust, that evidence, that dialogue, all of that is important. And thank you so much, all of you. We're 2 minutes over time. I would like to quickly just say thanks to everybody who has come in, shared your thoughts. The chat was always buzzing, so thank you so much for interacting. There are a couple of questions, thoughts we've still not been able to respond to, but we'll definitely share it with our speakers again and try to get you back some of these responses. Thank you so much, Vijay, Akshay, Ambali, Ankit, Poonam, for being there, for making this session so enriching. I don't think I ever go back from a conversation where it's just like, oh, I've got all the answers, but there's so much food for thought to think further. And this is the start of a dialogue as well. So thank you so much for engaging in that. And we would love to hear more of these things and the the examples that all of you have shared. And like I was talking about the Abhyas platform, for those who want to know more and would like to put up their experiences and examples, best practices, we would love to host it on that platform, which is open and meant for people to learn to come come and learn together from anywhere across the country and of open access. So looking forward to seeing some of you through that as well. And big thank you. See you and have a very good evening and a great weekend ahead. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tiyasha.
Thank you.
Also,
Thank you,
there is
everyone.
a feedback form. Those who can, please definitely fill that. Sorry, Vijay, I cut you.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was wonderful to talk to. I think the panel was really good. We had different perspectives coming up, and then nice discussion. I think there's a lot of things to do and to work upon.
Yes. Thank you, Tyasha. Thank you, all the panelists and the audience for staying. It was great hearing, and I agree with Vijay sir as well. Like different perspectives, and I think it added to the discussion. I learned a lot personally. Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you. Bye bye. See you all.
Lovely. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks, Ambali.